Hi, I'm Eric with Northwestern Coffee Mills, and today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about grinding beans and matching the grind to your brewing method. So you might have noticed on our website we have whole bean, coarse grind, standard grind, and fine grind, and that's what I have here. Here would be our whole bean, our coarse grind, standard grind, and then a fine. The reason for those grinds is we're trying to match the grind to your brewing method, because for the ultimate cup of coffee you want to extract between 18 and 22% of the flavor. You could extract up to 30% of the flavor, but once you get over that 22%, it gets bitter. It pulls out some of the bitterness of the coffee. And if you go under the 18%, then it'll taste like watery or flat. You won't get all those flavors. So here I have a fine grind, and this is almost like a powder, like flour. And that would be used for like an espresso. And so the water is forced through that coffee very quickly. And if you go to a coffee shop, the proper coffee shop, after your espresso is brewed, they should have it in your hand within 60 seconds. Because the longer that it's set, it'll turn bitter over time, because like some of that coffee flavor is still developing, and it'll pull out some of the bitterness. This would be what we call a standard grind, and that's about halfway between the fine grind and a coarse grind. And that would be for your typical like coffee filter. And ideally would be to have a white paper, so a bleached filter. And so if you're brewing your coffee, a lot of places will say 2 tablespoons of coffee for every cup. For me personally, that's stronger than I like. I like the flavor, but I don't like all the caffeine. So I brew mine lighter than that. But if you're getting a watery taste, like typical, let's say like a bun or whatever that sits on your counter that would take, your standard coffee filter, the water should be at least 201 degrees, between like 201 and 205 degrees. If it's not, you're not getting enough extraction out of that bean, and so you're just not getting the flavor. And if you ever turned one of those on, it sprays in like a spray pattern like this. And the reason why you want that grind is so that it slows the drainage of water through this filter, so that you get like 3 to 5 minutes contact with the beans to get the proper extraction. Then thirdly, we have the coarse grind. And so the coarse grind is much coarser. And that is going to be for like using a press pot. And so somewhere you could use a press pot a little bit finer than this grind I have right here. But that's typical. A coarse grind is what you would use in a press pot, because you have this wire mesh, which isn't that thick. And then also in a press pot, you'd put your beans in, and then you just set this down on there and you let it sit 3 to 5 minutes. So usually a good way to do this, if you don't have a thermometer, is just let the water boil and then let it sit for just a little bit, and then dump it into the press pot, and then let it sit for 3 to 5 minutes. And then we'll go to, there's also a pour over. A pour over, I would probably guess right around a standard grind, somewhere in there. Pour over is becoming more popular. The advantage to like a press pot is you get like some of the healthy oils and stuff from the coffee, because the wire mesh is a lot coarser than your traditional coffee filter. So a lot of people like press pots. I actually like a press pot when we travel a lot of times, or especially when we're camping. We always bring a press pot. We have a sweet stainless steel one that we use because it's really indestructible, I should say. And then lastly is the whole bean. So the advantage to the whole bean is the whole bean maintains the oils and the freshness until you grind it. So when we package, that's why we package in like an airtight bag. It has a little breather valve on the back, a one-way valve, but it's a black bag so that the sun can't get to the bean, and then totally sealed to maintain the freshness. But you can actually brew these whole beans. So I can't remember what people group it is, but they'll actually just boil the whole beans in water for a long time. And that's okay. It's not ideal. But if you can get the 18 to 22% extraction, you can still get a good cup of coffee. So ideally it would be buy in the whole bean and grind yourself. You could buy a cheap little countertop grinder. They're not ideal because it's just a blade that whips around and cuts the bean up. A burr grinder is the best because as soon as it hits the size that you want, then the coffee falls through, so you get a consistent grind across the bean. So that's what we use here in our shop. Everything that we have is burr grinders. Anyway, that's grinding and brewing 101. And so thanks for watching, and hope that you can, with this information, you can brew yourself a better cup of coffee. Thanks.